Hey everybody, this is Brad Dyke doing my hardware segment on technology and development and the nature of how we do things. So what we're going to talk about today is the future of the PC in what we're going to call the condensing effect of computer technology. Now, last week I did a segment on a CPU. Think of this as a future thing where we would have a CPU that is so reduced in the nanometer scale that we can put tens of terabytes of available memory on the CPU die right next to the processors, and that memory could be broken up into L1, L2, L3 caching, standard memory for the processor's resources, and the residual left over could be set up in SSD format disk space capacity and carry the values of SSD. And if you had a big enough set of processors, you would actually be able to have two of them, and you could RAID mirror them together. Locally hardware right inside the tiny little die of the actual processor stack. So what does that mean? Well, it means a couple of things. One, before anybody gets out of their seat and walks away who are PC tower lovers, who like the big towers like I do, and or computers that my fingertips can actually interact with, opposed to stuff that you can't interact with, which is so tiny that you can't do anything with them, right? You just can't. It's just, you buy it, it dies, you buy another one. It sucks, but anyways. The point is that with consolidation comes the reinventation of what we call the personal computer. Now, I've covered this before, and I'm not a big fan of all-in-one systems, but I am a fan of the consolidation of the die itself, which means that if we're going to get PCIe, or if we're going to actually, I should say, if we're going to get beyond PCIe, we have to be able to work within the die and or chipset dies more effectively than we did today. Now, what that basically means in a nutshell is we've got to get down into the lower environments that work in the nanometer scale for extremely high bandwidth speeds, so that the ability to computate values is more in tow with the processor's capacity. Now, what does that mean for the little box and the big box? Well, as you can see here, we still have the requirement of micro storage capacity, extended capacity, and of course the cooling. You see, I agree with one person who said, left a message, said, we all have the same inherited problems of Moore's Law. That's true. That's very true. But the key thing about reduced chip formats is if you scale them correctly, the voltage load variances stay lower, then the added value of something like memory doesn't compound the effect of the heat issues that you experience with computing. Two different things. The challenge is, and I agree with this, is the CPU die is right beside the memory die. Now that's a bit of a challenge, but it's not prohibitive. It can be addressed by using active heat sinks. Those are heat pumps, or TEDs, thermoelectric diode style heat cooling systems, which we've used in the past. They've been around for a while. A matter of fact, for a while, TEDs were part of the processors. The metal plate on the top was actually a TED. We're also referred to as a heat pump that helps facilitate extracting the heat from the processor. Now, the cool idea about that is, if we can miniaturize more and more and more, we can keep the boards fairly large, because the value of airspace, or what we call heat convection effect, is applicable in a bigger way. In other words, your heat sinks will have more value and have more flexibility, because the space within that box, let's say for instance the 740 here you see here, it would be, I would say, probably 3 times the size of this. So in other words, it would be roughly about that wide. It doesn't have to be any taller, but about a little bit bigger to handle the capacities, but it would have the ability of having micro interface I/O interface locks to be able to plug in other things like tiering, Bluetooth, stack, Thunderbolt. Additional SSD disks that can act as a secondary bus capacity for backing up. In other words, you can do backups inside the actual box itself. Now you're thinking to yourself, wait a minute, doesn't that kind of defeat the process? No, it doesn't, because if your CPU has everything in it in the die, you still need an alternate location to back it up. And it can't be from one processor to another. There will never not be a reason to have external disk capacity in the environments. Remember that detail. Just like it's never going to be in the case where you don't need a specialized network interface. Now, that might change in the nature of what we call the bus. Okay, so in the back, we might have a common denominator interface that is not native to the capacity of a class NIC or an external NIC or a variant NIC or something like that. Instead, what we have is a universal bridge. Now, let me show you what I'm talking about. What I'm talking about is this little guy right here. If we can reinvent the nature of the small computer, this little box right here, this is called a GBIC. Okay? Now, this particular one is a 10 gigabit fiber optic bridge, but as shown in this switch, I have copper, I have copper direct, I have multi and single strand fiber, and I have just generic Cat5. Yeah, I said Cat5. 10 gigabit switch here. What if the actual GBIC port, which is basically a box, right? And inside that GBICs is an empty hole. And you can slide any kind of network configuration into that hole. But the hole could have a bandwidth of 100 gigabit, right? So the secret sauce to that equation is, what if we had a common interface for inbound? Instead of calling it network, you can have like 4 of these little connectors on the back, or you make them even smaller, because we can reduce the format of these interfaces, so that we can have 8 of them. And some could be used for Bluetooth, some could be used for tiering, some could be used for 100 gig connections or multiple 10 gig connections for adaptive load balancing, 1 gig connections, RJ45 bridge connections for whatever speed that we require, 2.5, 1 gig, 10 gig, whatever. Thunderbolt, why not? InfiniBand, why not? Just basically an open port with a specific high bandwidth ASICs point that meets the metrics requirements. And of course the back bus, which is the total bus speed of all the ports, with a little bit more extra on top, just to make sure that you're keeping your segmentation correctly handled. And that means on the back of your PC, you'll have this small little quad or an 8 set of plug-ups that allow you to do whatever you want. And that would greatly improve the functionality of your PC. Now, what about GPUs? What about all of that other stuff? Yes, the dies can and have GPU functionalities on the CPU. That's one avenue which you could just continue to go with, or you can continue to have an external GPU bus. But the key thing there is, if you take the local SSD memory processing away from it and have it at the die, which means it's not even on the motherboard's logic board. In other words, all that processing is happening in here. And that guy right there, that's it. Not here, where it would sit on. That is a major divide and conquer strategy. So on the motherboard itself, you're going to have really fast bandwidth. Very similar to, let's say, call it PCIe 32 or something of that equivalency. And that is sitting on its own two sets of buses, 32 each, because there is no need for the PCIe for any of the other functionalities. So again, we've created a brand new pipe, bigger, broader, more functional than we could have if we ran everything through the motherboard, keeping, just the processing of the processor on the ZIF socket itself. So with that being said, again, a new way to reinvent that tower that rock and rolls, and it has SSD drives in it. We'll have a RAID NAS platform. I can see actually homes for Raspberry Pis or data bridging cards for Raspberry Pis using a common interface that could go right into an internal bus connector that can hit the CPUs, and that gives you the ability of doing segmentation processing beyond the CPU itself. That's really cool. It's an idea. Can't be done today, but it could be done in the future. And it allows you to be able to bring more things into the tower case, and the tower case is still valued in that case. Now, I had talked to an individual, which I kind of got a kick out of, who is like, all I wanted is a little, computer to do all my stuff. And I'll reach out to some interface to go out and interact with the stuff. That's fine, but it's not a PC. It's just an appliance. It's a dongle, basically, to the internet. All your stuff belongs to someone else. Good luck getting it back. If you're like myself, there are things I just don't want up there. I sure as heck do not want my photos up there of my family members and so on and so on. I want a backup, because nothing's guaranteed in this world, and my baby's pictures are pretty precious to me. Maybe just to me, but still, nevertheless. But just like the way this 7040 exhibits the nature of consolidation and miniaturization, which allows us to be able to get things to such a small footprint that we have SSD right here, NVMe class. We have a secondary bridging right here, which is, in this case, not being used for more capacity, but being used for Wi-Fi. Isn't that sweet what I mean? Be able to cross-platforming by standardizing those bus interfaces that these devices plug into. And then on top of that, by the way, I have myself an SSD drive, 2.5 inch, that I can go ahead and set up as well and repurpose the space so that not only am I better airflowing, but I've got even more capacity, greatly improving my little 7040 here, which, by the way, this is one of my Proxmox nodes, to do what I want it to do. Now, isn't that really cool? I think it is. So, to the people who think that the world is going to go to Apple, wake up. You have not a clue what you're talking about. No offense. And those who use Apple devices are using appliances. They really are, because of the nature of how an Apple machine works and how it's geared to be replaced periodically. I like my 10-year-old system. Works wonderful. More powerful, and still more powerful than anything Apple has out there. And it does everything I want. But if that's what you want, go for it. Rock and roll. Merry Christmas, Happy New Year. Enjoy your Apple appliance. Use it, including your little smartwatches and all of that. Mine is an Android smartwatch, by the way, and is a heck of a lot more capable than the Apple Watch, that's for sure. And the end result is that, we're reinventing the nature of what the motherboard is going to look like 5 years from now, because it's going to have a lot more on it. It might reduce in size to a degree, but not to the point where you won't have the ability to put something external on it, such as a GPU. It's just, that's the whole point of a personal computer, is that you can add peripheral devices to it to make what you need to be what fits your specific needs. That's why we call it a personal computer. Everybody and their brother is trying to invent the solution that could meet this thing, but because they lock in the attributes of their resources so that they can support it logistically, it never can happen. It's not feasible. It's not possible. And because of that fact, the end result is lackluster. So that's why I'm not a big fan of Apple PCs, Apple appliances, Apple TV, and all that stuff, because at the end of the day, at the 10-year mark, you got a closet full of dead equipment. It's just accruing space. And you made those corporations really happy because you bought all their stuff again and again and again and again and again. And you're the one with the dump, a trash dump in the backyard of all their antiquated equipment that they obsoleted to make you buy more. Be smarter, at least on certain fronts. think about can you turn those things that could be reusable. I mean, right now they've got kids out there, far younger than me, of course. I can call them kids, who are breaking Apple appliances, completely out of warranty. There's no value in it whatsoever, and they turn them into their own slave devices. Rock and roll, great. At least you're not filling a trash dump somewhere with microelectronics equipment. It's just wasteful, in my opinion. And our society soon, I don't think we're going to be able to be so wasteful as my expectation would be. Well, this is Brad Dyke. I'm signing off. I just wanted to have a quick powwow with you, a little short one because I did a 30-minute one plus earlier, to talk to how things are evolving. One other thing that might be coming to that same potential strategy is optical routing. In other words, photonic computing, not to be confused with quantum computing, totally unrelated. You're using electrons in a lot less capacity and photons in a lot more of a capacity. And that would offer some real values to a platform. But with that being said, I'm going to say goodbye and God bless. Take care.